I discovered my fiancé's cousin planned to ruin our wedding with lies about my past, so I set boundaries, but my fiancé called me dramatic, then secretly cancelled our health insurance and blamed me for not spending enough time with him. I, 28F, have been engaged to Kenneth, 29M, for about 14 months now. We're planning to get married next fall. I need to write this down because I don't know what to do anymore and everything keeps getting worse. Kenneth and I met through his cousin Ben, 31M, about 6 years ago. Ben and I went to the same high school, and we were part of a tight group of friends that included 2 other guys, Samuel and Ben. We all stayed close after graduation. Ben introduced me to Kenneth at a barbecue, and we hit it off right away. Kenneth and Ben grew up together. Their mothers are sisters, and the families lived 3 houses apart until Ben moved to another state for work about 5 years ago. They spent every summer together as kids and went to the same elementary school before Ben's family relocated to our town in middle school. The thing is, Ben has been making these comments lately that I can't ignore anymore. Back in high school, I had a massive crush on him during our sophomore year. Everyone in our friend group knew about it. I was going through an awkward phase with braces and terrible haircuts, and Ben was popular. He turned me down pretty clearly, and we just stayed friends. It became this running joke among us over the years, something we could laugh about at reunions. I never thought it would become a problem. But since Kenneth and I got engaged, Ben started changing how he told the story. Instead of it being about me having a crush that went nowhere, he started saying things like he dated me first. He only does this when we're around people who weren't part of our original high school group. At Kenneth's work party last year, Ben made a comment about how he and I had history before Kenneth came into the picture. At a family dinner 3 months ago, he told Kenneth's aunt that he introduced us because he wanted to keep me in the family after things didn't work out between us. None of this is true. We never dated. We never even went on one date. Kenneth would laugh it off. He said Ben was just being Ben, trying to be funny. I tried to let it go because I didn't want to cause problems. Ben lives across the country now and we only see him about 3 or 4 times a year when he visits. But the comments kept getting more frequent and more detailed each time he visited. Then 2 weeks ago, Samuel and Ben came to our apartment looking serious. They asked if they could talk to both of us. We sat down in the living room, and Samuel said they needed to tell us something about Ben. They had been out with him the night before at a bar, and Ben had been drinking. He started talking about his best man speech for our wedding. Samuel said Ben was planning to tell stories that weren't true. The main one was about how I had been with multiple guys in our friend group before ending up with Kenneth. Ben specifically used the phrase passed around, according to Ben. He was going to frame it like I worked my way through their entire circle of friends before settling on Kenneth. I sat there trying to process what they were saying. Samuel said he and Ben immediately told Ben he couldn't say that because it was a complete lie. Here's the actual truth. I went on one movie date with Samuel when we were 15. His mom drove us to the theater and picked us up after. With Ben, we dated for about 4 months in high school. We held hands in the hallways and kissed a few times at school dances. That was it. Kenneth is the only person from that friend group, or any group, that I've ever been intimate with. We waited until we'd been dating for 5 months before we slept together. Ben said Ben laughed when they confronted him and said the maid of honor would probably check all the speeches anyway, so it would be hard to get away with it. Then Ben said something that made my stomach turn. He said, "But what if I could?" Like he was still looking for a way to tell these lies at our wedding in front of our families and friends. After Samuel and Ben left, I looked at Kenneth expecting him to be furious. Instead, he shrugged and said Ben probably wouldn't actually do it. He said Ben likes attention and sometimes says stupid things when he drinks, but he wouldn't really humiliate us at the wedding. I asked Kenneth how he could be so calm about this. His cousin was planning to lie about me sleeping with half their friend group and make me look like I had no self-respect. Kenneth said we were all friends and Ben was just joking around poorly. He said I should try not to take it so seriously. I left the room and called my maid of honor, Sarah. She's been my best friend since college and doesn't know Ben or the high school group well. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time, then asked me if Kenneth had defended me at all. I realized he hadn't. He'd defended Ben instead. The next day, I talked to Samuel and Ben again without Kenneth there. I needed to understand exactly what Ben had said. Samuel told me Ben started the conversation by saying he wanted to give Kenneth and me the best wedding possible, then made jokes about how expensive weddings are, then somehow transitioned into this story about me being with everyone in the group. Ben said Ben framed it as an explanation for why we all stayed friends despite the complicated history. There was no complicated history. There were 2 innocent high school relationships that ended naturally and a one-sided crush that never went anywhere. I thought about Ben's timeline for when these comments started. His long-term girlfriend broke up with him around the same time Kenneth proposed to me. For 8 years, Ben had been with someone, and suddenly he was single right when we got engaged. The jokes about him dating me first started appearing right after that. When Kenneth got home from work, I told him I needed to talk seriously. I explained that I didn't want to be friends with Ben anymore. Not as a couple, and not personally. I said what Ben was planning crossed every line, and Kenneth's response to it made me question if he understood how serious this was. Kenneth got defensive. He said Ben was his best friend since they were kids and I was asking him to choose between us. I told him I wasn't asking him to cut Ben out of his life, but I was done pretending these comments were harmless jokes. I said I wouldn't be going to any more events where Ben would be present, and I didn't want him at our wedding if he couldn't treat me with basic respect. Kenneth was quiet for a while. Then he said something that surprised me. He said if one of my bridesmaids was planning to humiliate him at the wedding, I would tell him to reconsider that friendship. He said he would expect me to stand up for him. I watched him work through it in his head. He asked for a few days to figure out what to say to Ben. We agreed that if Ben and I ever needed to talk about this, it would be with all three of us in the room together. Kenneth said he would bring up my decision to end my personal friendship with Ben when they talked. Our wedding is still 9 months away. We made some plans for the reception, just in case. We decided that Kenneth could choose someone else to give the best man speech. Or we could skip speeches entirely. If Ben did speak, we would tell our DJ to cut the microphone if anything inappropriate started. I felt a little better having a plan, but I was still waiting to hear how the conversation with Ben went. That conversation happened 4 days later. Kenneth called Ben while I was at work. When I got home, Kenneth said he'd talked to him and everything was fine. I asked what he meant by fine. Kenneth said he told Ben that the comments needed to stop and that I was upset. He said Ben apologized and promised he was only joking. He said Ben was stressed about other things in his life and wasn't thinking clearly. I asked Kenneth if he told Ben I didn't want to be friends anymore. Kenneth said he mentioned it, but he told Ben it would probably blow over once everyone calmed down. I stared at him. I asked him why he told Ben it would blow over when I had been very clear about my decision. Kenneth said he didn't want to burn bridges with his cousin over a misunderstanding. I told him it wasn't a misunderstanding. Ben had planned to lie about me in front of everyone we know on one of the most important days of our lives. Kenneth said I was being dramatic. He said Ben wouldn't have actually done it, and now that he'd been called out, it was over. I didn't say anything else that night. I went to bed early and barely slept. The next week, I had a panic attack at work. My hands were shaking and I couldn't breathe properly. My coworker drove me home. I made an appointment with a counselor because I couldn't keep feeling like this. The counselor asked me to talk through what was causing the stress. I told her about Ben and the wedding and Kenneth's response. She asked me if I felt supported by Kenneth. I said I didn't know anymore. Then something else happened that made everything worse. I had a health scare 2 weeks ago. I started having severe stomach pain and ended up in the emergency room at 2 a.m. Kenneth came with me. The doctors ran tests and said it was likely a stomach ulcer caused by stress. They prescribed medication and told me to follow up with my regular doctor. When we were checking out, the billing person asked for my insurance information. I gave them my card. She came back and said the insurance had been terminated. I looked at Kenneth, confused. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. In the car on the way home, I asked him what was going on. He admitted that he had canceled his health insurance back in January. I was on his plan through his work. He said he needed to save money for the wedding and the monthly premium was $160. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We had been engaged for over a year. I had created a detailed budget for the wedding with spreadsheets showing exactly how much everything cost. My parents were contributing $15,000. The total wedding cost was around $24,000. We had been saving together. I asked him why he thought canceling our health insurance was the answer when we had a clear plan. He said the wedding was more expensive than he thought it would be and he panicked. He apologized but didn't offer any other explanation. I took on a second job after that. I already work full-time making about $72,000 a year, but I started doing freelance editing work at night to make extra money. I thought if Kenneth was stressed about finances, I could help ease that burden. The editing work meant I spent an extra 2 hours every evening on my laptop after my regular commute. I was exhausted. Kenneth's response to my extra work was not what I expected. He started making comments about how I never wanted to spend time with him anymore. He would ask me to watch a movie and I'd say I had editing work to finish. He would sigh loudly or leave the room. One night he said I cared more about work than our relationship. I reminded him I took the second job to help with wedding costs, something he said was stressing him out. He said he never asked me to do that. The breaking point happened the night before a work trip. I had to fly to Nashville early in the morning for a conference. The flight was at 6, so I needed to be up by 3:30. I asked Kenneth if we could have an early dinner so I could pack and get to bed at a reasonable time. He suggested we order pizza. He pulled up the menu on his phone and asked what I wanted. I said anything was fine except for the jalapeno and pineapple one. I've never liked spicy food, and pineapple on pizza makes me sick. Kenneth has known this for 6 years. He said, "What, just plain cheese then?" in a mocking tone. Then he got up and walked out of the room. I followed him and asked what was wrong. He didn't answer. I asked if he was going to order dinner or if I should do it. He said I should just order what I want since I'm so picky. I told him I wasn't being picky, I had just asked to avoid one type of pizza out of a dozen options. He shrugged. I went back to the kitchen and waited. He didn't come back out. At 7 I realized he wasn't going to order anything. I went to the bedroom and asked him to please just order the jalapeno pineapple pizza since he clearly wanted it. He said I was forcing him to make the decision now. I said I was about to order it myself because I was out of time. He finally ordered it. When the pizza arrived, his entire mood shifted. He was smiling and chatting like nothing had happened. I barely ate. I finished packing and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The next morning, I drove to the airport. I was shaking the entire drive. I got on the plane and couldn't stop the tears. I went to the bathroom twice during the flight to cry where no one could see me. At the conference, I kept thinking about that pizza conversation. It was such a small thing, but it represented everything that had been building up. Kenneth had canceled our insurance without telling me. He had failed to set boundaries with Ben. He had dismissed my feelings over and over. And now he couldn't even let me skip one pizza topping without making me beg him to order dinner. I called Kenneth that night from my hotel room. I told him I couldn't do this anymore. I went through everything: Ben, the insurance, the way he had treated me when I took on extra work, the pizza incident. I told him I didn't feel like a partner in this relationship. I felt like someone who had to constantly adjust and compromise while he did whatever he wanted. He was silent for a long time. Then he asked me if I was calling off the wedding. I said I didn't know. He said I needed to decide by the end of October, which was 3 weeks away at that point. I asked if we could do couples counseling. He said no. He said counseling wouldn't change anything and I just needed to decide if I wanted to marry him or not. I've been back home for a week now. We're living in the same apartment but barely speaking. He asked me yesterday if I had made my decision yet. October is almost over. I told him I was still thinking. He said I either trust him or I don't, and if I don't, we should just end it now. I've been sleeping on the couch for 3 nights. I keep thinking about the fact that I'm supposed to marry this person in less than a year, and I can't imagine how we would handle actual problems if this is how we handle these ones. My dress is already bought. The venue is booked. The invitations are printed but not sent yet. My parents have already given us the money for their contribution. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Everyone keeps asking about wedding plans and I just smile and nod. Sarah asked me yesterday if I was okay and I broke down and told her everything. She said it sounds like I already know my answer but I'm afraid to admit it. Maybe she's right. I have 4 more days until Kenneth's deadline. Update 1. I need to update everyone who responded to my original post. It's been 3 weeks since I wrote about Ben and the wedding situation. I did not make Kenneth's deadline. October ended and I still hadn't given him a yes or no answer about the wedding. He took that as my answer and moved out the day after Halloween. He packed his things while I was at work and left his key on the kitchen counter. He texted me that evening saying his parents were helping him move into a temporary place and we would need to figure out how to handle the wedding cancellations. That was it. No conversation, no last attempt to work things out. I called my parents that night and told them everything. My dad was quiet, which is unusual for him. My mom asked if I was sure this was what I wanted. I told her I didn't want it, but I also couldn't marry someone who had shown me so clearly that my feelings came second. She said they would help me with whatever I needed to do next. The venue contract had a clause that we would lose our deposit if we canceled more than 6 months out, but we'd get back about 40% of what we'd paid. My parents said not to worry about their contribution money. They told me to use what I needed for cancellation fees and keep the rest to get back on my feet. I sent an email to the venue the next morning explaining we needed to cancel. The event coordinator was kind about it and sent me the paperwork. I called the caterer, the photographer, and the florist. The photographer was the hardest call because she's a family friend who had given us a discount. She said she understood and not to worry about it. The dress was non-refundable, so I have a wedding dress hanging in my closet that I will never wear. Kenneth and I had to split our friend group, which was messy. Samuel and Ben reached out to me separately to say they were sorry about how everything turned out. They said they wished they had spoken up about Ben's behavior sooner, before it got to this point. I told them it wasn't their fault. They had tried to warn us, and Kenneth had chosen not to take it seriously. Sarah helped me pack up Kenneth's remaining things that he'd forgotten. We boxed up photos and gifts from his family. His mom texted me once asking if we could talk, but I didn't respond. I don't know what there is to say. The real shock came about a week and a half after Kenneth moved out. I got a call from Samuel. He said he needed to tell me something but wasn't sure if I wanted to hear it. I told him to just say it. Samuel said that Ben had come to visit Kenneth at his new place the previous weekend. During that visit, Ben apparently told Kenneth and a few other guys about a woman he had been seeing for the past few months. The woman lived in his city. They had met through a dating app. According to Samuel, who heard this from Ben, who was there, Ben said he wasn't sure if the relationship would go anywhere, but he was enjoying spending time with someone who understood him after his difficult breakup. Then Ben made a comment that Samuel said made everyone in the room uncomfortable. He said he was glad he could visit Kenneth more now and that it had worked out that things didn't go forward with the wedding. Samuel said Ben laughed when he said it, like it was a joke, but no one else laughed. Ben apparently asked Ben what he meant by that. Ben backtracked and said he just meant that now Kenneth could focus on himself for a while before getting into another serious relationship, and that being single wasn't so bad. Samuel said he left shortly after that because the whole conversation felt wrong. He called me because he thought I deserved to know that Ben seemed almost pleased about the breakup. I asked Samuel if he thought Ben had been trying to break us up all along. Samuel said he honestly didn't know, but the comment about things working out felt intentional. He said Ben had been acting strange ever since his own breakup, and maybe seeing Kenneth get engaged had bothered him more than anyone realized. I sat with that information for days. I kept replaying all of Ben's comments and behaviors over the past year. The jokes about dating me first started right after Kenneth proposed. The escalation happened around our engagement party. The speech plan came just a few months before the wedding. Every time Ben had visited, the comments had gotten worse. And Kenneth had defended him every single time. I wondered if Kenneth knew on some level what Ben was doing. Maybe that's why he had been so resistant to setting real boundaries. Maybe he didn't want to admit that his closest childhood friend was actively trying to sabotage his relationship. Or maybe Kenneth just didn't care enough to fight for us when it would have required standing up to Ben. I got a text from Kenneth 2 weeks after he moved out. He said he had been thinking about everything and he understood why I was upset, but he thought I had overreacted to the situation with Ben. He said Ben had apologized and meant it, and I should have accepted that and moved on. He said the insurance thing was a mistake in judgment, and the pizza night was just a bad day, and I had blown everything out of proportion because of stress. He ended the text by saying he still loved me but he couldn't be with someone who couldn't forgive mistakes. I didn't respond. Sarah came over that weekend with wine and takeout. We sat on my couch and she asked me how I was doing. I told her I kept waiting to feel sad about losing Kenneth, but mostly I just felt relieved. I said that probably meant something was really wrong with the relationship if ending an engagement felt like freedom instead of loss. Sarah said she had been worried about me for months. She said I had seemed anxious and tired every time she saw me, and she hadn't realized how bad things were until I told her everything. I asked her if she thought I had made the right choice. She said the right choice is the one where you don't spend the rest of your life compromising your boundaries and defending your reality to someone who should already believe you. She said Kenneth had shown me exactly who he was, and I had been smart enough to pay attention before legally binding myself to him. I cried for the first time since he had moved out. Not because I missed him, but because I had spent so much energy trying to make the relationship work that I hadn't noticed I was the only one trying. My lease is up in 2 months. I'm looking for a smaller apartment that I can afford on my own. I dropped the freelance editing work because I don't need the extra money anymore. There's no wedding to save for. I've been sleeping through the night again without waking up anxious. I started running in the mornings before work. Small things that I had stopped doing because I was too exhausted from managing Kenneth's moods and Ben's comments and wedding planning and everything else. Samuel told me last week that Kenneth and Ben are planning a guys' trip in December. Just the two of them. He said Kenneth mentioned it to the friend group and several people thought it was weird timing, but no one said anything directly to Kenneth. I told Samuel I hope they have a great time. I meant it. Kenneth gets to keep his best friend, and I get to keep my peace. That feels like a fair trade. The one thing I'm struggling with is the weight of other people's opinions. Kenneth's aunt called my mom to say she was disappointed I had given up so easily on the relationship. Some of our mutual friends have stopped reaching out to me. I saw on social media that Kenneth's version of events involves me being unable to handle wedding stress and ending things impulsively. He doesn't mention Ben or the insurance or any of the actual reasons. People who only hear his side probably think I'm unstable. I've thought about posting something to correct the record, but Sarah advised against it. She said the people who matter will ask me directly, and the people who don't ask don't matter. My dad took me out to lunch yesterday. We went to this diner we used to go to when I was in high school. He ordered coffee and I got a sandwich I couldn't finish. He asked me if I was doing okay, really okay. I told him some days were harder than others, but I was managing. He said something that stuck with me. He said when he married my mom, he knew she would always tell him the truth even when it was uncomfortable, and he would always listen even when he didn't want to hear it. He said that's what partnership looks like, and anything less than that isn't worth committing to forever. He said he was proud of me for recognizing that before it was too late. I still have the wedding dress. I don't know what to do with it. Part of me wants to sell it and get whatever money I can back. Part of me wants to donate it. Part of me wants to keep it as a reminder of what I walked away from and why that was the right decision. For now, it stays in the closet. Maybe someday I'll know what to do with it. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update. Christmas has come and gone, and I'm writing this from my new apartment. I moved in 3 weeks ago. It's smaller than the place Kenneth and I shared, but it's mine. I painted the bedroom a soft gray color and bought new curtains. Small things that make it feel like a fresh start. Kenneth reached out to me in early December. He sent a long email asking if we could meet up to talk. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking and wanted to apologize in person. I didn't respond right away. I talked to Sarah about it first. She asked me what I hoped to get out of meeting with him. I realized I didn't have a good answer to that question. I wasn't hoping to get back together. I didn't need closure because I already felt clear about why things ended. So I sent a short email back saying I didn't think meeting up would be helpful for either of us, but I wished him well. He showed up at my office 3 days later. The receptionist called back to my desk and said someone was there to see me. When I walked out to the lobby, Kenneth was standing there holding flowers. He looked thinner than I remembered. He asked if I would just give him 10 minutes to talk. I told him he couldn't show up at my workplace like this. He said he didn't know how else to reach me since I wasn't responding to his messages. I agreed to talk outside so we wouldn't cause a scene in front of my coworkers. We sat on a bench outside the building. He put the flowers between us. He started by saying he had been wrong about a lot of things. He said he should have taken the situation with Ben more seriously from the start. He said he should have told me about canceling the insurance instead of hiding it. He said he had been stressed about money and the wedding and didn't know how to communicate that. He said he missed me and wanted to try again. He asked if I would consider couples counseling now, even though he had refused it before. I let him finish. Then I asked him if Ben was still his best man. Kenneth looked confused. He said there was no wedding anymore, so the question didn't make sense. I clarified. I asked if Ben was still his best friend, if they were still as close as before. Kenneth said yes. He said Ben was family and nothing would change that. I told Kenneth that was my answer. I said if he still didn't see the problem with how Ben had treated me in our relationship, then counseling wouldn't fix anything. Kenneth started to argue, but I stood up. I told him I had to get back to work. I left the flowers on the bench. He texted me that night saying I wasn't being fair. He said everyone makes mistakes and Ben had apologized. He said I was holding a grudge over something that never even happened since Ben never actually gave the speech. I blocked his number after that. I didn't have the energy to keep explaining something he didn't want to understand. Then in mid-December, something happened that made me glad I had walked away when I did. I got a message on social media from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Lauren. She said she was sorry to reach out like this, but she thought I should know something about Ben. She said she had been dating him for about 4 months, and they had recently broken up. During their relationship, Ben had told her about his cousin Kenneth and Kenneth's ex-fiancé who couldn't handle the pressure of wedding planning. That was me, according to Ben's version. Lauren said she hadn't thought much about it at the time. But after they broke up, Lauren was going through old photos on Ben's phone trying to delete pictures of herself. She came across screenshots of texts between Ben and Kenneth from last summer and fall. She said she knew it was wrong to read them, but something made her look. The texts showed Ben actively encouraging Kenneth to stand his ground against me. In one exchange, Kenneth had mentioned that I was upset about Ben's comments regarding my past relationships. Ben had responded by saying I was being too sensitive and Kenneth shouldn't let me control who he was friends with. In another text, Ben told Kenneth that I seemed high maintenance and maybe this was a sign of how I would be in the marriage. Lauren sent me screenshots of some of these texts. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store reading them. There were messages from September where Kenneth told Ben I wanted to end my friendship with him. Ben wrote back that this was manipulative behavior and I was trying to isolate Kenneth from his family. He said Kenneth needed to make me understand that Ben was non-negotiable. There was a text from October, right around the time of the pizza incident, where Kenneth vented to Ben about how I was always working and never made time for him anymore. Ben responded saying that it sounded like I had checked out of the relationship and Kenneth deserved better. The worst part was seeing Kenneth's responses. He agreed with Ben every time. He never once defended me or told Ben to back off. In one message, Kenneth said he thought I was overreacting about the speech idea, and Ben had replied that if I couldn't take a joke, married life was going to be hard. Kenneth had sent back a laughing emoji. Lauren apologized for getting involved. She said she broke up with Ben because he had been constantly talking about Kenneth and checking in on how Kenneth was doing after the breakup. She said it felt like Ben was more invested in Kenneth's life than in their relationship. She said she thought I deserved to know that Ben had been working to undermine my relationship with Kenneth, and Kenneth had let him. I thanked Lauren for reaching out. I asked her why she decided to tell me. She said when she first heard Ben talk about me, he described me as someone who was unstable and demanding. But after reading those texts, she realized Ben had been manipulating the situation to make me look bad. She said she felt guilty for believing his version without question, and she wanted to set the record straight with someone. I showed the screenshots to Sarah. She read through them and then asked me if I was okay. I told her I was angry, but not surprised. Somewhere deep down, I think I had known Kenneth was listening to Ben more than he was listening to me. Seeing it in writing just confirmed what I had suspected. Sarah asked if I was going to send them to Kenneth. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to forward everything to him with a message saying this is who you chose. But what would be the point? Kenneth had already made his choice months ago. He chose Ben then, and he would choose Ben now. I didn't respond to Kenneth's email requests after that. I deleted the screenshots because I didn't want to keep looking at them. What mattered was that I was out. I wasn't the one making excuses for someone who actively tried to destroy my relationship. I wasn't the one who picked loyalty to a cousin over honesty with a partner. Samuel reached out between Christmas and New Year's. He said he had heard through mutual friends that Kenneth was telling people I had become bitter and resentful after the breakup. Samuel wanted me to know that he and Ben had both confronted Kenneth about the way he was talking about me. Samuel said he told Kenneth that I had every right to walk away from a relationship where I wasn't respected, and Kenneth should stop trying to rewrite history. Kenneth apparently didn't take it well and accused Samuel of taking sides. Samuel said he was fine being on my side if it meant calling out behavior that was wrong. I met up with Samuel and Ben for coffee in early January. We talked about everything that had happened. Ben said he wished he had pushed harder when Ben first mentioned the speech idea. He said he didn't realize how bad things had gotten between Kenneth and me until after everything fell apart. I told him it wasn't his responsibility to fix my relationship. They had done what they could by warning us. What Kenneth and I did with that warning was up to us. Samuel mentioned that Kenneth and Ben's trip in December had apparently not gone well. He didn't have details, but someone in the friend group had heard they had cut the trip short by 2 days. Ben said he wondered if they had finally run out of things to bond over now that they didn't have my relationship to critique. I didn't ask for more information. Whatever was happening with Kenneth and Ben wasn't my concern anymore. I spent New Year's Eve with Sarah and a few other friends. We went to a small party at someone's apartment. At midnight, people were kissing and making resolutions. I stood on the balcony watching the fireworks in the distance. Sarah came out and stood next to me. She said she was proud of how far I had come in just a few months. I told her I was just trying to get through each day. She said that's all anyone can do, and I was doing it well. My parents had me over for dinner last week. My mom asked if I had heard from Kenneth recently. I told her about the office visit and the flowers and the texts. She shook her head and said some people never learn. My dad asked if I was dating anyone new. I said no, and I wasn't planning to for a while. I needed time to remember who I was without constantly managing someone else's feelings and defending myself against someone else's family member. The wedding dress is still in my closet. I keep meaning to deal with it, but I haven't yet. Maybe I'm not ready to let go of that last piece of evidence. Evidence that I almost made a huge mistake. Evidence that I was smart enough to walk away. Evidence that loving someone isn't enough if they don't respect you. For now, it can stay there. I have time. Update 3. It's been 4 months since Kenneth moved out, and I think this will be my last update. I'm writing this because some people have been messaging me asking what happened with everything, and I want to close this chapter properly. February was quiet. I focused on work and spent time with my family. My younger brother got engaged to his girlfriend of 3 years, which meant family gatherings suddenly included wedding talk again. My mom kept apologizing and trying to change the subject whenever someone brought up venues or vendors. I told her it was fine. I was genuinely happy for my brother. His relationship was nothing like what mine had been with Kenneth. His fiancé was someone who communicated openly and treated him like an equal partner. Watching them plan their wedding didn't make me sad about my own cancelled one. It just reminded me what I had been missing. In late February, I got another message from Samuel. He said he needed to tell me something and he hoped I wouldn't be upset with him for sharing it. Ben had apparently let slip during a group chat that he had been talking to Kenneth about his concerns over me throughout our entire engagement. He said this casually, like it was common knowledge. Samuel said several people in the group chat had called Ben out, saying it wasn't his place to interfere in his cousin's relationship. Ben had defended himself by saying he was just looking out for family. The group chat had devolved into an argument, and Samuel said at least 3 people had left the conversation entirely. Samuel told me that he and Ben had decided they were done with Ben. They said his behavior over the past year had crossed too many lines, and they couldn't keep pretending it was acceptable just because they had all been friends since high school. I told Samuel I appreciated him letting me know, but he didn't have to cut people off on my behalf. He said it wasn't just about me anymore. He said Ben had shown them who he really was, and they were choosing to believe him. In early March, Kenneth called me from a number I didn't recognize. I answered because I thought it might be work-related. When I heard his voice, I almost hung up. He asked if I would please not hang up, that he needed to tell me something important. Against my better judgment, I stayed on the line. Kenneth said he and Ben had gotten into a huge fight. He said Ben had admitted during an argument that he never thought I was right for Kenneth. Ben told him that he had been trying to protect Kenneth from making a mistake by marrying someone who didn't fit into their family. Kenneth said he finally saw what everyone had been trying to tell him. He said he was sorry for not believing me, for not standing up for me, for letting Ben poison his view of our relationship. He said he had ended his friendship with Ben and wanted me to know that. I asked Kenneth why he was telling me this now. He said he thought I deserved to know that I had been right all along. He said he hoped maybe we could talk about trying again, now that Ben was out of the picture. I was quiet for a long time. Then I told Kenneth that cutting off Ben didn't fix the fundamental problem. The problem was that Kenneth had listened to Ben in the first place. The problem was that when I told Kenneth something was wrong, he had dismissed me and defended the person hurting me. The problem was that it took Kenneth losing friends and having his own fight with Ben to finally see what had been obvious to everyone else for months. I told Kenneth that even without Ben, I didn't trust him anymore. I didn't trust that he would prioritize our relationship over outside influences. I didn't trust that he would believe me when I said something was wrong. I didn't trust that he wouldn't make major decisions, like canceling our health insurance, without telling me. I said I hoped he learned something from all of this, but I wasn't the person who should teach him those lessons anymore. Kenneth said he understood. He said he knew he had ruined things beyond repair. He asked if we could at least be friends eventually. I told him maybe someday, but not now. I needed space and distance and time to fully move on. He accepted that and we ended the call. I told Sarah about the conversation the next day. She asked how I felt. I said I felt relieved that it was finally over. Not just the relationship, but the wondering if I had made the right choice. Hearing Kenneth admit what Ben had been doing, and knowing that I had called it correctly from the beginning, gave me a sense of closure I didn't know I needed. Last week, I finally dealt with the wedding dress. I donated it to an organization that provides free wedding dresses to military brides. Someone will get use out of it, and that feels better than selling it or keeping it in my closet as a reminder. Sarah came with me to drop it off. We got lunch after and she told me I seemed lighter. I said I felt lighter. Like I had been carrying something heavy for a long time and finally put it down. I've started dating someone new. Nothing serious yet, just coffee dates and conversations. He's kind and asks questions about my day and doesn't have any childhood best friends who hate me. It's early, but it's easy in a way my relationship with Kenneth never was. There's no drama, no second guessing, no feeling like I need to defend my reality. It's just simple and straightforward, and I'm learning that's what I should have had all along. My brother's wedding is in June. I'm a bridesmaid. I'm looking forward to it without any sadness about my own cancelled wedding. I'm excited to celebrate him and his fiancé and watch them start their life together. That's what weddings should feel like, celebration, not anxiety. Someone asked me in the comments of my first post if I thought Kenneth ever really loved me. I've thought about that question a lot over these past few months. I think he did love me, in his way. But his love wasn't strong enough to override his loyalty to Ben. His love wasn't strong enough to make him question someone who was actively undermining me. His love wasn't strong enough to choose me when it mattered. And that's the answer, love that isn't strong enough to show up when you need it most isn't the kind of love you build a marriage on. I'm doing okay now. Better than okay, actually. I'm sleeping well. I'm not anxious all the time. I'm not walking on eggshells or managing someone else's reactions or defending myself constantly. I'm just living my life, and it turns out that's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything. To everyone who commented and messaged and shared their own stories, thank you. Reading about other people's experiences helped me feel less alone during the hardest parts. I hope my story helps someone else recognize when it's time to walk away. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit something isn't working and leave before you're legally tied to it. I'm glad I was brave enough to do that. I'm glad I chose myself. This is my final update. I'm closing this chapter and moving forward. I hope Kenneth finds whatever he's looking for. I hope Ben figures out why he felt the need to destroy his cousin's relationship. Mostly, I hope I never have to think about either of them again. I'm ready for whatever comes next, and I'm ready to face it without constantly looking over my shoulder or questioning my own judgment. That's freedom, and it's worth more than any wedding could have been.